The fork stopped midair, not slowly, not with hesitation. It froze, suspended between the plate and the billionaire's mouth. The moment a small voice cut through the warm quiet of one of Seoul's finest private Korean dining rooms and said 7 words that nobody in that room was prepared for. Your food has been tampered with. Marcus Ren, 51 years old, founder of Ren Capital Group, a man whose net worth had appeared in Forbes 3 years in a row, did not move. His fork stayed raised. The bulgogi on the end of it, sizzling seconds ago on the cast iron plate in front of him, went still. The kimchi bowls, the lettuce wraps, the white rice, the 12 side dishes arranged across the white tablecloth like a painting, none of it had been touched. Because standing 3 feet from the table, pointing one steady finger directly at his food, was a little black girl. 8 years old, box braids pulled high on top of her head, small pearl studs in her ears, a white and red floral dress with a pink bow tied at the waist. She was not sitting. She had not been invited. She was simply standing there, arm extended, finger unwavering, dark eyes locked on Marcus's face with a certainty that no adult in that room could match. She was not afraid. That was the part that hit hardest. Marcus's 2 bodyguards, positioned near the lattice screen doors, looked at each other and said nothing. The head chef pressed his back flat against the far wall. Raymond Cho, Marcus's business associate of 6 years, set his chopsticks down so carefully they made no sound at all, and stared at the girl the way a man stares at something he cannot find a category for. Marcus lowered the fork. His eyes went to hers. She did not blink. She did not move her arm. She did not look like a child who had made a mistake and was about to take it back. His chest went tight. His mouth went dry. He had survived hostile takeovers, 3-year courtroom battles, rooms full of men twice his size who wanted him finished. He had never once flinched in public. But something about this girl, the absolute stillness of her, the calm behind her eyes, the fact that she had walked into a room that was not meant for her, and said the most dangerous thing in it without flinching, sent something cold moving straight through him. He set the fork down on the rim of the plate. It landed with a sharp, ringing crack that echoed in the silence. Nobody in the room spoke. Nobody told her she was wrong. Hi viewers, before this story moves 1 second further, I need to ask you something real and personal. If a child, someone with no title, no power, and nothing to gain walked up to you and told you your life was in danger, would you stop and listen? Drop your honest answer in the comments right now. And if you are new here, hit subscribe before this chapter ends. Because what this little girl knew, how she knew it, and what it was about to unravel in Marcus Ren's world will keep you watching until the very last word. The girl's name was Naomi. She was 8 years old. Her mother worked as a senior server at this restaurant and had brought Naomi along that evening while a babysitter fell through. Naomi had been sitting quietly in a back hallway near the prep kitchen, coloring in a small notebook when 2 men in cleaning uniforms came through the service entrance arguing in low, fast voices. She did not understand all of it. She understood enough. She understood the word food. She understood the word tonight. And she understood the way children understand things before the world teaches them to second-guess themselves, that the man in the navy suit at the big table needed to know. So she walked in and told him. No one sent her. No one coached her. She simply told the truth because she was 8 years old and had not yet learned to be afraid of rooms that were not made for her. The question that sat in Marcus's chest as he looked at that untouched plate, the question that would not let go for the next 6 weeks, was not about the food. It was about who had put something in it, how far inside his world they had reached to do it, and whether the person sitting across from him at that very table already knew. Marcus Ren did not grow up with forks. He grew up with plastic spoons and paper plates in a two-bedroom apartment in Inglewood, California, where the hallway lights flickered every single time someone slammed the stairwell door too hard. His mother worked the overnight shift at a county hospital laundry facility, 6 nights a week, $42 an hour. She came home before sunrise smelling like industrial bleach. She kept a worn King James Bible on the kitchen table that she read every morning before sleeping, running one finger under each line, mouthing the words quietly the way people do when they mean every one of them. Marcus read it too, not for faith, for focus, for the discipline of sitting still and absorbing something larger than the noise outside the window. He graduated high school with a 3.8 grade point average and a full academic scholarship to UCLA. He studied finance. He worked 3 part-time jobs during undergrad. For 4 years, he wore the same pair of black leather dress shoes, resoled twice, polished every Sunday night without exception, because he understood early that the way a man presents himself before he speaks is the first judgment every room makes about him. By 32, Wren Capital Group was incorporated in Delaware and operating out of a rented 2-room office in downtown Los Angeles. By 40, it managed $7.4 billion in assets across North America and Southeast Asia. The sole office, 28th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, a direct view of the Han River, was his 12th international location. To everyone who worked with Marcus, he was disciplined, precise, and impossible to rattle. What none of them knew, not his CFO, not his board, not the legal team that had served him for 8 years, was that Marcus had spent 9 years quietly funding a forensic data firm out of East Austin, Texas. 6 people, a converted warehouse space, an operation called Lodestar Analytics, run by a former IRS criminal investigation analyst named Keena Marsh. Lodestar did one thing. It traced financial fraud buried inside legitimate corporate structures, shell companies, layered wire transfers, vendor invoices fabricated to pass surface-level audits but hollow underneath. He had never once activated them. He had simply kept them funded and ready, $60,000 a year, wired quietly with no contract, no deliverables, no reporting structure. The same way his mother had kept $40 rolled in a rubber band behind the bathroom mirror for 11 years without spending a single bill. She told him once when he was 12, sitting at the kitchen table while she counted out rent money, "You keep something back, always, because the day will come." He had carried that sentence for 39 years. What Marcus did not know the morning after the dinner, sitting at the window of his 14th floor hotel suite, black coffee going cold on the table, the sole skyline gray and flat in front of him, was that Raymond Cho, the man he had trusted completely for 6 years to manage his Korean operations, had made a phone call the week before the dinner that he had not logged, had not reported, and had not once mentioned. The call lasted 14 seconds. Victor Lane walked into rooms like he had already decided what they were worth. 54 years old, silver-haired, always in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that his assistant replaced at the start of every season without being asked. Victor was chairman of Lane Meridian Holdings, a private equity firm with active interests in real estate, media, and infrastructure across 8 countries. Profiled in the Wall Street Journal twice. Quoted in the Financial Times so consistently his publicist had a standing relationship with 3 of their editors. The kind of man whose handshake lasted exactly 1 second longer than it needed to, because that extra second was a choice, not a reflex. He was brilliant. He was connected. And he had spent 15 years watching Marcus Wren rise from a 2-room Los Angeles office into a $7 billion global operation, watching with the particular attention of a man who had decided that Marcus Wren was eventually going to be a problem. Victor had studied Marcus the way a chess player studies an opponent across a long game. And the conclusion he had reached, the belief he had locked into his strategy, built his next major move around, and staked a $2.3 billion infrastructure deal on was specific. He believed Marcus Wren's greatest weakness was his loyalty. Marcus trusted people past the point the data supported. He absorbed attacks with patience instead of force. Over the past 8 years, Marcus had survived 3 separate coordinated strikes, a stolen Singapore deal, a sustained media smear campaign, a board member planted inside Wren Capital who fed information outward for 2 full years. Each time, Marcus had responded by going still, going quiet, waiting. Victor read every one of those responses as the behavior of a man who did not know how to strike back. He was wrong about every single part of it. But that wrongness was not something Victor was capable of seeing yet, because his entire model of Marcus was built on the one thing Marcus had made sure nobody could see: the reserve, the patience that was not weakness but preparation, the stillness that was not fear but precision. 3 weeks before the Seoul dinner, Victor made his move. He used Raymond Cho, a man he had been cultivating through 4 years of consulting fee payments rooted to a holding company Raymond believed was clean, to arrange for a specific compound to be introduced into Marcus's meal that evening. Not lethal, nothing that would surface in a standard screening, but enough to impair executive cognition for 6 to 8 weeks. Long enough for Victor to close the infrastructure consortium, lock the investors in, and cut Wren Capital out of the Seoul market permanently before Marcus could think clearly enough to respond. Victor was parked outside the restaurant that evening, checking his phone every 4 minutes. The call that was supposed to confirm everything went through had not come. He did not yet know why. He did not yet know about a little girl with box braids and a pink bow, and a pointing finger who had simply told the truth. By 7 the following morning, Marcus's phone showed 43 unread messages. He did not open them yet. He sat at the window of his hotel suite, both hands flat on the table, the cold coffee in front of him, and thought about 14 seconds. His head of security had run Raymond's outgoing call log the previous night with access Marcus had granted at midnight. The relay number traced to Hong Kong. The destination on the other end had taken 3 hours and 2 separate database pulls to surface. A private legal practice in Singapore. A man named Paul Sherwood. Marcus knew the name the way you know a face you have seen in the background of too many photographs, never central, always present, always slightly out of frame. Sherwood had served as outside legal counsel to Lane Meridian Holdings for 3 years before opening his own practice. His name had appeared in documents adjacent to 2 deals Marcus had lost or been pushed out of in the past 2 years, both times at the edge, both times in a position designed not to be noticed. Marcus opened the 43 messages, read every one without responding to a single one, and set his phone face down. The pressure was architectural. It had been designed to feel total and to arrive from every direction at once. Lane Meridian had filed a motion the prior week contesting Wren Capital's bid on the Seoul infrastructure contract, citing procedural irregularities that Marcus's legal team had spent 4 days searching for and could not find because they did not exist. The motion was not built to win. It was built to create delay, generate uncertainty, and make the consortium's investors nervous enough to start looking for an exit. 3 of Marcus's Korean business partners had gone quiet over 10 days. No returned calls, no email follow-ups. The silence was too clean and too synchronized to be coincidence. A financial blog connected through 2 layers of ownership to a Lane Meridian media fund had published a piece 6 days prior calling Wren Capital, over-leveraged and structurally at risk in its Asian markets. No named sources. No cited data. It did not need either. In a market where confidence was the actual currency, the words alone were doing their work. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number he had not dialed in 9 years. 6 rings. Then a voice, unhurried, clear, direct. Lodestar Analytics, this is Kina. Marcus said 4 words. It is time, start. He ended the call, set the phone down face first, looked out at the gray Seoul skyline. Somewhere across this city, Victor Lane was waking up and reviewing his timeline. He was confident. He was certain. He had every reason to be certain. Except for the one reason he had never known to account for. Kina Marsh did not waste a single hour. By noon Seoul time, 2 in the morning in Austin, she had 3 analysts running simultaneous threads on Lane Meridian Holdings, Paul Sherwood's Singapore practice, and the Cayman Islands holding firm that Marcus's security team had surfaced the previous night from the restaurant's cleaning company Vendor Records. She was 38 years old, former IRS Criminal Investigation Division, 11 years tracing money through offshore structures so layered and recursive they looked like pure noise, until you knew how to find the single repeating element underneath. She had left the government because the pace was incompatible with the work. She had built Lodestar because she needed to move at the speed the truth actually required. Marcus had funded her for 9 years, $60,000 annually, no contract, no deliverables, no meetings. Just a standing arrangement. When he called, she would have full capacity ready and a fully cleared team available. By the following evening in Seoul, the first layer was mapped. The Cayman holding firm connected outward to 6 additional shell companies, all registered in the same 18-month window, all using the same registered agent, all carrying nominee directors whose names appeared on 47 other shells across 3 separate jurisdictions. One of the 6 had received a wire transfer from a Lane Meridian Luxembourg Real estate subsidiary 22 days before the dinner. The transfer amount was $42,000. The destination was a retainer account connected to Paul Sherwood's Singapore practice. The memo line read, Consulting Services, Q4 Review. There were no consulting services. There was no Q4 review. Kina packaged the first tranche into an encrypted file and sent it to Marcus at 9:40 that evening with one plain text line at the top of the document. First layer confirmed. 2 more underneath. Give me 72 hours. Marcus opened it at the hotel desk, read it fully, closed it. He picked up a pen and circled a single date on the notepad beside his laptop. The Infrastructure Consortium's closing dinner, the event that would lock the investors in, finalize the deal, and push Ren Capital out of Seoul permanently, was 12 days out. Victor Lane had sent Marcus a formal invitation 4 days ago. It was not a courtesy. It was a dare. The venue Victor had chosen for the closing dinner was the same restaurant where a little girl in a floral dress had pointed at Marcus's plate and saved his life. Victor needed Marcus to walk into that room and feel what he had intended him to feel 2 weeks ago. Marcus had not responded to the invitation yet. He circled the date, set the pen down, and looked out the window. Victor Lane was 3 miles away at a Gangnam penthouse reception, holding a wine glass, laughing at something an investor had just said. He was completely at ease. He had no idea that a woman in East Austin had just found $42,000 with his fingerprints on it, and was already digging for the next layer. The consortium's closing dinner was held at the same restaurant. Victor had chosen the venue himself. He had called his assistant the morning after the first dinner before he even knew what had gone wrong at the table, and confirmed the booking for the closing event 3 weeks out. It was reflex. Victor always chose the room, but looking back, the choice revealed something about him. He could not resist the message. He needed Marcus to sit in that same space, under those same warm amber lights, surrounded by the consortium's investors and the city board and the two journalists he had personally placed at the event, and understand, without a single word being said, that Victor had decided how this ended. 40 people filled the room, legal teams, 3 members of the Seoul City Infrastructure Board, including Sun Kang, who chaired it and who had worked alongside Marcus through 4 major deals across 11 years. Raymond Cho sat near the back, expression flat, eyes that moved to the door twice in the first 10 minutes. Marcus walked in 3 minutes after the stated start time. He was never late, Victor knew that. The 3 minutes were noted. Victor stood at the center of the room and waited. He let Marcus come close enough. Then he smiled wide, easy, the smile of a man collecting something already owed to him, and said, in a voice pitched to carry past their immediate circle, "Marcus, I was not sure you would be feeling well enough to join us tonight." The room went quiet in sections. One table, then the next, then the next. Heads turned, eyes moved to Marcus. Marcus stopped walking. He looked at Victor. He did not speak. His jaw did not move. His hands stayed loose at his sides. His weight did not shift. He held eye contact for 4 full seconds, not the 4 seconds of a man preparing a response, but the 4 seconds of a man who has already decided that what just happened does not deserve one. Then he turned left. Sun Kang stood 2 feet away. Marcus looked directly at her and said, evenly and clearly, "Sun Yi, you look well. How is your daughter settling in Edinburgh?" Sun Yi blinked, then a real smile crossed her face. "She is doing beautifully, Marcus. Thank you for asking." The room exhaled. Victor's smile stayed on his face, but something behind his eyes switched off, the way a light goes out behind a window, because the moment he had constructed so carefully, the half-second of visible damage he needed Marcus to show in front of these 40 people, had not come. Marcus had given him nothing. And now the room was reading Victor, not Marcus. People were noting the comment that had hung in the air without landing. They were looking at the smile that was not quite connecting to the eyes behind it. They were making the quiet social calculations that rooms full of careful people make when someone has just revealed more about themselves than they intended. The verdict was instant and wordless, and there was nothing Victor Lane could do to take it back. Keena's second file arrived at 8:45 that evening. Marcus excused himself from the table at 9, walked to a private hallway near the coat check, and read the complete document on his phone in under 5 minutes. 3 pieces, specific, clean, and locked together. The first was the wire transfer record, $42,000 from Lane Meridian's Luxembourg subsidiary to Paul Sherwood's Singapore retainer account, time-stamped 22 days before the first dinner. Attached to the transfer was an email chain between Sherwood and a procurement contact at the restaurant's contract cleaning company. The emails discussed preparation services for a private dining event on a specific date. No substance was named. The date matched. The venue matched. The payment matched. The second piece was a Cayman Islands corporate registration document. 2 of the 6 shell companies in the chain listed a beneficial owner on filings submitted using a personal identification number. Not a nominee, not a proxy with a disposable name. Victor Lane, identified by his own personal ID number. A detail buried inside a cross-reference database, maintained by the European Financial Intelligence Unit, that the original filing had been structured to make invisible, and that Keena's analyst had surfaced by running the registration cluster against a pattern match the registry had never been designed to catch. The third piece was a recording. 14 seconds of audio recovered from a cloud backup connected to Paul Sherwood's firm's server, a backup Sherwood had never disabled, stored inside a folder named to look like a routine system file. On the recording, Raymond Cho's voice, Victor Lane's voice. The date stamp placed the call 7 days before the Seoul dinner. The content was 4 sentences. 4 sentences were enough. Marcus forwarded all 3 pieces simultaneously to 3 recipients. His New York attorney, who had already briefed and placed on standby a senior prosecutor at the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. Jae-ho Yun, a financial investigative journalist who had been sitting in a parked car outside the restaurant for the past hour and 20 minutes with a laptop open and a source agreement already signed. And the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office directly, through the secure submission portal his attorney had set up 48 hours earlier. He walked back to the dining table, sat down, reached for the kimchi. Across the room, Victor Lane's phone buzzed against the tablecloth. Victor looked down at the screen. He looked up. His eyes found Marcus across the room. Marcus did not look up from his plate. The truth did not need an announcement. It was already moving. It had already left the building. Nothing that happened in this room in the next 10 minutes was going to change what was already in motion outside of it. Victor Lane's world did not end with noise. It ended the way a structure ends when its foundation gives, not in one clean collapse, but in a sequence of fast failures arriving too close together to address, each one triggering the next before the response to the first one is finished. By 6 the following morning, Jae-ho Yun's piece was live. Full documentation embedded. The wire transfer records and the registration filings published in their original form. By 8, the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office had issued a formal investigation notice to Lane Meridian Holdings, hand-delivered to their Seoul building, and simultaneously posted to the public registry. By 10, 3 consortium investors had withdrawn, in writing, through attorneys, in letters that arrived at Victor's office within a 90-minute window. The letters used different language, which meant they had not coordinated. They had simply each made the same calculation, independently within the same window of time. A formal investigation notice was not something you kept your name next to. By noon, the Wall Street Journal had called Victor's publicist twice. By 2 in the afternoon, Lane Meridian's Singapore exchange listing had dropped 11% on elevated volume. Institutional holders were moving. By 4, Victor's board of directors had convened an emergency session. Victor's assistant told him about the meeting. Victor was not invited to join it. Paul Sherwood's Singapore practice posted a client notice at 4:30. All operations temporarily suspended pending regulatory review, effective immediately. Raymond Cho walked into the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's office at 5:37 in the evening. His attorney had called ahead. Cooperation status was secured before the building closed for the day. Marcus was back at his hotel suite when his attorney called to confirm Raymond's cooperation. He was standing at the window, the same window where 48 hours ago he had sat with cold coffee and 43 unread messages, and the gray skyline pressing in. Now the city was lit gold and deep blue, the Han River dark and still below, and Marcus stood with both hands at his sides and simply looked at it. He did not feel what he thought he would feel. He felt something quieter, something that had no clean name. The particular stillness of a man who has held something in reserve for a very long time and has finally, completely, set it down. He thought about a $40 bill rolled in a rubber band behind a bathroom mirror. He thought about his mother's hands smoothing it flat on the kitchen table the month the hospital cut her shift hours, and the rent came due. He thought about what she said to him when he was 12 years old sitting in that kitchen. Not as comfort, not as philosophy, just as plain observable fact. You keep something back, always, because the day will come. He had kept something back for 39 years. The day had come. And it was over. The formal indictment came 6 weeks after the consortium dinner. Victor Lane was charged on 3 counts in the Seoul Central District Court: conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, criminal interference with a government infrastructure contracting process, and the count his legal team had not anticipated and could not effectively contest: attempted unlawful administration of a substance with intent to impair. The vial recovered from the restaurant kitchen, the Sherwood email chain, the wire transfer record, and 14 seconds of audio had given prosecutors a chain of evidence that required no inference and permitted no reasonable alternative reading. Bail was set at $4 million. Victor posted it. His passport was surrendered that same afternoon. He returned to his Hong Kong residence, where he now lived inside a perimeter defined by his attorneys, his board's ongoing emergency governance sessions, and the slow, systematic dismantling of everything he had spent 20 years assembling. Paul Sherwood entered a formal plea agreement in Singapore. His cooperation produced 2 additional names, senior operational executives inside Lane Meridian, who had managed the logistics of the plan on the ground. Both were placed on administrative leave. Both were subsequently charged. The Seoul infrastructure contract was formally reopened for competitive bid 8 days after the indictment. Ren Capital submitted a revised proposal. Sun Yee Kang's infrastructure board evaluated 4 competing bids over 6 weeks and awarded the contract to Ren Capital. Total value, $2.3 billion. Duration, 7 years. Marcus flew back to Los Angeles on a Wednesday morning. He held no press conference. He gave no interviews. Ren Capital's communications office released a 3-sentence statement. Ren Capital remains committed to its partnerships in Seoul and across Southeast Asia. We are grateful for the integrity of the institutions that pursued this matter. We look forward to the work ahead. Victor Lane's name did not appear in it. Marcus landed at Lax at 4 in the afternoon, got into the back of his car, removed his jacket, and loosened his collar. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes, not from exhaustion but from something that felt, for the first time in 6 weeks, like the absence of weight. He was not the same man who had frozen with a fork raised above a plate in that Seoul dining room. The ordeal had not broken him. It had removed something he had been carrying without realizing it, a low background tension that had lived in his chest so long it had stopped feeling like anything at all. It was gone now. Before leaving Seoul, Marcus had worked through his attorney to establish an anonymous trust. The trust funded a full college savings account in the name of Naomi, the 8-year-old black girl in the floral dress who had walked into a room she was not invited into, pointed at a plate of food, and told the truth without hesitation, because no one had yet taught her to be afraid of rooms like that. He did not want her to know it was from him. He simply wanted her to have options. That was what all of it had always been about. 18 months later, Marcus Wren stood at the front of a folding chair training room in Compton, California. Not a boardroom, not a glass tower. A community center room with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly when the air conditioning cycled on, a whiteboard that still had another instructor's notes from the week before, and 23 young people between the ages of 16 and 22 sitting in front of him with notebooks open and phones placed face down on the desks, the way his program required from the first day. He had been running this Saturday financial literacy course for 14 months, 10-week rotating cohorts, corporate structure, contract literacy, how to read a balance sheet, how to identify a shell company inside a legitimate filing, how to protect yourself in a deal before you ever sign your name to anything. He wore no jacket on Saturdays. He had a coffee on the desk that had gone cold 40 minutes into the session. He had not noticed. He was mid-explanation, walking the room through how a holding company conceals its true ownership inside a filing cluster, when a girl in the third row raised her hand. 17 years old, natural hair, red backpack with a small sun keychain hanging off the zipper. She asked, "How do you know when someone is hiding something on purpose versus when they just made a mistake?" Marcus stopped. He looked at her for a moment. "Pattern," he said. "One mistake is a mistake. 2 in the same direction is a choice. 3 is a system. You watch the pattern, not the individual move." She wrote it down. He watched her write it and thought about a little black girl in a floral dress with box braids and a pink bow, standing in a room she was not supposed to be in, arm extended, finger pointing, eyes steady, not afraid. He thought about 9 years of preparation sitting quiet and unfired in an Austin warehouse while the world kept moving. He thought about $40 behind a bathroom mirror, and a woman who came home before sunrise smelling like bleach, and read her Bible at the kitchen table every single morning before sleeping. He thought about what it costs to hold something in reserve when everything around you is telling you to spend it. Use it. Defend yourself now before there is nothing left to defend. The real power was never in the wealth. It never had been. It was in the patience to build something that force could not take, and the discipline to hold it, quietly and without announcement, until the exact moment it was needed. If this story landed somewhere real for you, if you have ever held your ground when every room you were in and every voice around you expected you to fold, drop a comment below right now and tell us what you held onto and what it cost you to hold it. Every single person in that Compton room started with less than they needed and more than they knew. So did Marcus Wren. And so did an 8-year-old girl in a floral dress who walked into the wrong room, pointed at a plate of food, and changed everything, simply because she had not yet been taught to be quiet. If someone in your life is in that exact place right now, holding on, staying still, waiting for their moment, share this story with them tonight. Not to motivate them, to let them know the wait is not weakness. Subscribe if you are here for stories that actually mean something. And drop a fire emoji in the comments if you stayed all the way to the very last word. Because the ones who stay until the end, they were always the ones meant to hear it.